Welcome to my YouTube channel where I study the best investors from around the world. Today we'll be taking a look at mental models across disciplines. In this channel I've showcased the mental models from Charlie Munger, which talks about his 24 causes of misjudgment. This set of mental models are just a subset of mental models that he extracted from human psychology. In this video, I'll cover the exhaustive list from different disciplines. A big thanks and a shout out to Farnham Street Blog that highlighted these mental models. I'll leave a link in the description below for those interested in reading more of their great content. Mental models and why they're important. This usefulness of our mental models in the situation at hand is proportional to the quality of our thinking. The larger your toolbox of models, the more likely you are to have the right models for seeing reality. Variety appears to be important when it comes to improving your decision-making abilities. The majority of us are experts in one domain. We have a few mental models from our discipline instead of a lattice work. Each expert sees things differently. A typical engineer will think in systems by default. A psychologist will think in terms of reward and punishments. A biologist will think in evolutionary terms. We can walk around a problem in 3 dimensions by combining these disciplines in our head. We have a blind spot if we only look at a problem one way. Blind spots, on the other hand, can be fatal. Charlie Munger said in a famous speech in the 1990s that, well, the first rule is that you can't really know anything if you just remember isolated facts and try and bang them back. If the facts don't hang together on a lattice work of theory, you don't have them in usable form. With that in mind, let's start. Mental models at the core. Number 1. The territory isn't on the map. Reality is not depicted on a map. Even the best maps have flaws. This is due to the fact that they are dilutions of what they represent. If a map accurately depicted the territory, it would no longer be a reduction, and thus no longer be useful to us. A map can also represent something that no longer exists, such as a snapshot of a moment in time. This is critical to remember as we solve problems and make better decisions. Number 2. Competence circles. We have blind spots when our actions are driven by ego rather than competence. If you know what you're talking about, you'll be more able to see where you have an advantage over others. You'll know where you're vulnerable and where you can improve if you're honest about where your knowledge is lacking. Understanding your circle of competence helps you make better decisions and achieve better results. Number 3, thinking from the ground up. One of the most effective ways to reverse engineer complicated situations and unleash creative potential is to use first principles thinking. It's a tool for helping to clarify complicated problems by separating the underlying ideas or facts from any assumptions based on them. It's also known as reasoning from first principles. All that's left are the essentials. If you understand the fundamentals of something, you can use the rest of your knowledge to create something new. Number 4, thought experiments. Thought experiments are devices of the imagination used to investigate the nature of things, and they're used in many disciplines, including philosophy and physics. To test what can be known, they must be able to open up new avenues for inquiry and exploration as a result of this. Thought experiments are effective because they allow us to learn from our mistakes and avoid repeating them in the future. They enable us to take on the impossible, assess the consequences of our actions, and revisit history in order to make better decisions. They can assist us in determining what we really want and the best route to get there. A hallmark of Albert Einstein's career was his use of visualized thought experiments as a fundamental tool for understanding physical issues and for elucidating his concepts to others. Number 5. Thinking in seconds. Almost everyone is able to predict the immediate consequences of their actions. This kind of first-order thinking is simple and safe. but it also ensures that you get the same results as everyone else. Second order requires us to consider not only our immediate actions and their consequences, but also the long-term consequences of those actions. Failure to consider second and third order effects can have disastrous consequences. Number 6. Thinking in terms of probabilities. Probabilistic thinking entails attempting to estimate the likelihood of a specific outcome occurring using mathematical and logical tools. It is one of the most effective tools that we have for increasing the precision of our decisions. Probabilistic thinking aids us in identifying the most likely outcomes in a world where each moment is determined by an infinitely complex set of factors. When we have this information, we can make more precise and effective decisions. Number 7, inversion. Because it helps you identify and remove obstacles to success, inversion is a powerful tool for improving your thinking. Inversion comes from the word invert, which means to upend or turn upside down. It means approaching the situation from the opposite end of the natural starting point as a thinking tool. Most of us have a tendency to approach a problem in one direction, forward. It allows us to think backwards by turning the problem around. Starting at the beginning is sometimes useful, but starting at the end can be even more beneficial. Number 8, the principle of Occam's razor. Simpler explanations are more likely to be correct than those that are more complicated. This is the essence of Occam's razor, a well-known logic and problem-solving principle. Rather than wasting time attempting to disprove complex scenarios, you can make more confident decisions by relying on the explanation with the fewest moving parts. Number 9, Hanlon's razor, a rule. Hanlon's razor, which has an enigmatic origin, states that we should not attribute to malice what is more easily explained by stupidity. This model helps us to avoid paranoia and ideology in a complex world. We look for alternatives instead of missing opportunities. By not assuming that poor results are the result of a bad actor, this serves as a reminder that people make mistakes. It begs the question of whether there is another plausible explanation for what has happened. The explanation with the least amount of intent is the most likely to be correct. Mental models from physicists and chemists. Number 1, relativity. The idea that the observer cannot truly understand a system of which he is a part has been used in several contexts in the world of physics, but the most important aspects to study is the idea that an observer cannot truly understand a system of which he is a part. For example, a man inside an airplane may not feel any movement, while an outside observer can see the movement happening. This type of relativity has a similar effect on social systems. Number 2, reciprocity. When I push against a wall, physics says the wall will push back with equal force. When one individual acts on another in a biological system, the action is likely to be reciprocated in kind. Human beings, on the other hand, act with a high level of reciprocity. Number 3, thermodynamics. Thermodynamic laws describe the flow of energy in a closed system. The laws are unbreakable and govern the physical world. They depict a world in which useful energy is constantly lost and in which energy cannot be created or destroyed. Applying what they've learned in a classroom to the social world can be a profitable venture. Number 4, inertia. Unless acted upon, an object in motion with a specific vector wants to keep moving in that direction. Individuals, systems, and organizations all exhibit the same effect, which is a fundamental physical principle of motion. It allows them to save energy while also putting them at risk of being destroyed or eroded. Number 5, viscosity and friction. The difficulty of movement is described by both friction and viscosity. Viscosity measures how difficult it is for one fluid to slide over another. Friction is a force that opposes the movement of objects in contact with each other. The higher the viscosity, the greater the resistance. These ideas teach us a lot about how our surroundings can stifle our progress. Number 6. Velocity. Velocity is not the same as speed, and the two are frequently confused. Velocity is defined as the product of speed and vector, how quickly something moves. An object that takes 2 steps forward and 2 steps back has a certain speed, but no velocity. In real life, the addition of the vector, that crucial distinction, is what we should think about. Number 7. Leverage. The majority of the world's engineering marvels were achieved through the use of leverage. The famous Archimedes once said, "Give me a lever long enough and I shall move the world." Through leverage, we can generate a large output force with a small amount of input force. Understanding how to apply this model to the human world can be extremely beneficial. Number 8. Energy of activation. Although fire is nothing more than a mixture of carbon and oxygen, the world's forests and coal mines do not spontaneously combust because such a chemical reaction necessitates the introduction of a critical amount of activation energy to get the reaction started. 2 combustible elements are insufficient. Number 9. Catalysts. A catalyst is a non-reactant that either initiates or maintains a chemical reaction. Without the addition of catalysts, the reaction may slow or stop. Of course, social systems share many characteristics, and we can see the catalysts in the same light. Number 10. Alloying. We make new substances when we combine different elements. This isn't surprising, but what is surprising about the alloying process is that 2 plus 2 can equal 6, not 4. The alloy can be much stronger than the simple addition of the underlying elements would suggest. We engineer great physical objects as a result of this process, but we also understand many intangibles in the same way. A combination of the right elements in social systems or even individuals can produce a 2 plus 2 equals 6 effect similar to alloying. Mental models from biology. Number 1. Part of evolution, natural selection and extinction. Natural selection was once dubbed the greatest idea anyone ever had, after Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace realized that species evolved through random mutation and differential survival rates in the 19th century. If we call human intervention in animal breeding artificial selection, we can call Mother Nature's decision on mutation success or failure natural selection, because the mutations that are best suited for survival tend to be preserved. But as we all know, things change. Number 2. Part 2. Adaptation and Red Queen effect in evolution. Even the combination of their genetics and their environment, an unavoidable combination, species tend to adapt to their surroundings in order to survive. Adaptations made during a person's lifetime, however, are not passed down genetically, as was once thought. Populations of species adapt through the process of evolution by natural selection, as the best examples of the species replicate at a higher rate than the rest of the population. Evolution by natural selection model results in a kind of arms race between species vying for limited resources. When one species evolves a beneficial adaptation, the other species must respond in kind, or the species will perish. Standing still can result in a loss of ground. The Red Queen effect is named after the character in Alice in Wonderland who said, "Now here, you see, it takes all of the running you can do to keep in the same place. If you want to get somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast as that." Number 3. Ecosystems. Any group of organisms that coexists with the natural world is referred to as an ecosystem. Diverse forms of life take different approaches to survival in most ecosystems. With such pressures leading to varying behavior, many of the same conclusions can be drawn about social systems as they can about physical ecosystems. Number 4. Niches. The majority of organisms find a niche, a way of competing and behaving in order to survive. A species will usually choose a niche to which it is best suited. When multiple species compete for the same niche, it can lead to extinction because there can only be so many species doing the same thing before limited resources run out. Number 5. Self-preservation. An organism's DNA would tend to disappear over time if it lacked a strong self-preservation instinct, effectively eradicating that DNA. While cooperation is an important model, all organisms have a strong self-preservation instinct that can lead to violent, erratic, and/or destructive behavior in those around them. Number 6. Replication. High-fidelity replication is a fundamental building block of diverse biological life. The DNA molecule appears to be the fundamental unit of replication, as it provides a blueprint for the offspring to be built from physical building blocks. There are numerous methods of replication, but the majority can be divided into 2 categories: sexual and asexual. Number 7. Cooperation. Most biological systems are characterized by competition, but cooperation at various levels is just as important. In fact, the first complex cell and all of the life we see around us were most likely created by the cooperation of a bacterium and a simple cell. No group can survive without cooperation. A group cooperation leads to even more complex forms of organization. At multiple levels, cooperation and competition tend to coexist. The prisoner's dilemma is a well-known game theory application in which 2 prisoners are better off cooperating with one another, but if one of them cheats, the other is better off cheating. This model can be found in economics, war, and a variety of other aspects of everyday life. Though the prisoner's dilemma theoretically leads to a bad outcome, cooperation is almost always possible and must be explored in the real world. Number 8. Organizational structure. The majority of complex biological organisms have an intuitive sense of how they should organize themselves. While not all of them, especially in the animal kingdom, end up in hierarchical structures, many do. Humans like to believe that they are separate from this, but they are subject to the same hierarchical instincts as any other organism. The Stanford prison experiment and the Milgram experiments, for example, demonstrate what humans had known for many years: the human tendency to be influenced by authority. We tend to look to the leader for guidance on behaviors in a dominance hierarchy like ours, especially in stressful or uncertain situations. As a result, whether they like it or not, authority figures have a responsibility to act well. Number 9. Incentives. In order to stay alive, all creatures respond to incentives. Constant incentives will, to some extent, cause a biological entity to behave consistently. Humans are included and serve as excellent examples of biology's incentive-driven nature. However, humans are complicated because their incentives can be hidden or intangible. The golden rule of life is to keep doing what has worked in the past. Number 10. Minimizing energy output is a common tendency, mental and physical. Any biological organism that was wasteful with energy would be at a severe disadvantage for survival in a physical world governed by thermodynamics and competition for limited energy and resources. As a result, we see that most people's behavior is governed by a desire to use as little energy as possible. Mental models from systems thinking. Number 1. Loops of feedback. Positive and negative feedback loops exist in all complex systems where A causes B, which influences A and C, and so on, with higher order effects frequently resulting from loop movement. A change in A in a homeostatic system, such as the temperature of the human body or The behavior of an organizational culture is frequently brought back into line by an opposite change in B to maintain the system's balance. Unless and until an outside force changes the loop, automatic feedback loops maintain a static environment. A runaway feedback loop is a situation in which a reaction's output acts as its own catalyst, autocatalysis. Number 2, equilibrium. The process by which systems self-regulate to maintain an equilibrium state that allows them to function in a changing environment is known as homeostasis. They usually overshoot or undershoot in a little and have to keep adjusting. Like a pilot flying a plane, it is off course more often than it is on course. Everything in a homeostatic system contributes to keeping it within a range of equilibrium, so knowing the range's limits is critical. Number 3, bottlenecks. A bottleneck is a point where a flow of something tangible or intangible comes to a halt, preventing it from continuing. A bottleneck in the production of any good or service, like a clogged artery or a blocked drain, can be small and have a disproportionate impact if it is in a critical path. Bottlenecks, on the other hand, can be a source of inspiration because they force us to consider whether there are other ways to succeed. Number 4, scale. The sensitivity of systems to scale is one of their most important principles. When you scale up or down, properties or behaviors tend to change. When studying complex systems, we must always be able to roughly quantify the scale at which we are observing, analyzing, or predicting the system, at least in orders of magnitude. Number 5, a safety margin. Engineers, on the other hand, have developed the habit of including a margin of error in all calculations. Driving a 9,500-pound bus over a bridge designed to hold precisely 9,600 pounds is rarely seen as intelligent in an unknown world. As a result, only a small percentage of modern bridges ever fail. We can often profitably give ourselves margins as robust as the bridge system in everyday life outside of physical engineering. Number 6, churn. Churn is the concept that insurance companies and subscription services are well aware of. Every year, a certain number of customers must be replaced. As demonstrated by the Red Queen effect, standing still is the equivalent of losing in many businesses and human systems. Churn occurs when a constant figure is lost and must be replaced before any new figures are added on top. Number 7, algorithms. While difficult to define precisely, an algorithm is a set of automated rules or blueprint that guides a series of steps or actions to produce a desired result, and is often expressed as a series of if-then statements. Algorithms are best known for their application in modern computing, but they also exist in biological life. For example, human DNA contains an algorithm for constructing a human being. Number 8. A critical mass has been reached. When a system is about to make a discrete transition from one phase to the next, it becomes critical. The marginal utility of the last unit before the phase change is far greater than that of any previous unit. Water turns from a liquid to vapor when heated to a certain temperature, the critical mass required for a critical event to occur. Most commonly in nuclear systems is referred to as critical mass. Number 9, emergence. The interaction of lower order components tends to produce higher level behavior. The end result is frequently nonlinear or exponential rather than linear, as in simple addition. One of the most important properties of emergent behavior is that it cannot be predicted by studying the individual components. Number 10, irreducibility. Most systems have irreducible quantitative properties, such as complexity, minimums, time, and length, which we discover. The desired result simply does not occur below the irreducible level. It's impossible to get several women pregnant in order to shorten the time it takes to have one child. And it's also impossible to reduce a successful automobile to a single component. These outcomes are irreducible to a certain point. Number 11. The law of diminishing returns. A Pareto principle. Important real-world results are subject to a decrease in incremental value over time due to scale. A poor family is a good example. Provided them with enough money to thrive, and they will no longer be poor. Additional money, however, will not improve their situation after a certain point. There is a clear diminishing return on additional dollars at some roughly quantifiable point. The law of diminishing returns frequently goes in the wrong direction. Mental models from math. Number 1. Distributions. When properly sampled, the normal distribution produces the well-known graphical representation of a bell curve, with a meaningful central average and increasingly rare standard deviations from the average. Human height and weight are well-known examples. But it's also worth noting that many common processes, especially in non-tangible systems like social systems, do not follow this pattern. Power law or exponential distributions are in a contrast to normal distributions. Number 2. Compounding. Einstein described compounding as a world wonder, or so we think. We have no idea, but it's still amazing. Compounding is the process of adding interest to a fixed sum, which then earns interest on the previous sum as well as the newly added interest, and so on indefinitely. It's more of an exponential effect than a linear or additive effect. Money isn't the only thing that compounds, so do ideas and relationships. Compounding has physical limits and diminishing returns in tangible realms. Intangibles can compound more freely. The time value of money, which underpins all of modern finance, is also a result of compounding. Number 3. Sampling. When we need information about a population, a group of people, things, or events that are similar, we usually need to look at a sample, meaning a part of the population, because it is rarely possible or desirable to consider the entire population. We aim for a sample that is representative of the entire population. If everything else is equal, more measurements equal more accurate results. The results of small sample sizes can be skewed. Number 4. Randomness. Much of the world is made up of random, non-sequential, non-ordered events, which the human brain struggles to comprehend. When we attribute causality to things that are actually outside of our control, we are duped by random effects. We will tend to see things as more predictable than they are and act accordingly if we don't correct for the fooled by randomness effect, our faulty sense of pattern seeking. Number 5. The mean regression. Long deviations from the average in a normally distributed system will tend to return to the average as the number of observations increases, the so-called law of large numbers. Regression to the mean can deceive us, as when a sick patient improves spontaneously around the time that they start taking a herbal remedy, or when a bad sports team goes on a winning streak. It's important to distinguish between statistically likely and causal events. Number 6. Zero multiplication. Any reasonably educated person understands that any number multiplied by 0, regardless of its size, remains 0. This is true in both human and mathematical systems. Fixing the 0 has a much greater effect than trying to enlarge other areas, as simple multiplication demonstrates. Number 7. Equivalence. With the introduction of algebra, we were able to show mathematically and abstractly that two seemingly unrelated things could be the same. We can demonstrate equivalence or inequivalence by manipulating symbols, and this has led humanity to untold engineering and technical abilities. Knowing the fundamentals of algebra can help us comprehend a wide range of important results. Number 8. Area of appearance. The amount of space on the outside of a three-dimensional object is called its surface area. As a result, The larger your surface area, the more contact that you have with your surroundings. A large surface area is sometimes desirable. Our lungs and intestines have a large surface area to increase oxygen and nutrient absorption. Sometimes we want to limit our exposure, such as by limiting our internet access to reduce the attack surface. Number 9. Maxima on a global and local scale. A mathematical function's maxima and minima are its largest and smallest values across its domain. Although there is only one maximum value, the global maximum smaller peaks of value, all known as local maxima, can exist within a given range. Global and local maxima assist us in identifying peaks and determining whether there is still room to go higher or lower. It also serves as a reminder that sometimes we must descend in order to ascend. Mental models from microeconomics. Number 1. Cost of opportunity. When you can't do one thing, you can't do another. We live in a world where trade-offs are the norm, and the concepts of opportunity cost governs everything. There is no such thing as a free lunch, as the saying goes. Number 2, destruction through creativity. The term creative destruction, coined by economist Joseph Schumpeter, describes the capitalist process at work in a functioning free market system. Entrepreneurs will compete in a never-ending game of creative one-upmanship, destroying old ideas and replacing them with newer technology driven by personal incentives, including but not limited to financial profit. Number 3, advantage in comparison. David Ricardo, a Scottish economist, had an unusual and counterintuitive insight. Two people, firms, or countries could benefit from trading even if one of them was better at everything. Comparative advantage is best understood as an opportunity cost. If an entity has the ability to trade, it forgoes free productivity gains by focusing on what it does best. Number 4, specialized knowledge, pen factory. Another Scottish economist, Adam Smith, emphasized the benefits of speculation in a free market system. Rather than having a group of workers produce an entire item from start to finish, Smith explained that having each of them specialize in one aspect of production is usually far more productive. However, he cautioned that not every worker will be able to live such a life. This is a trade-off of the specialization model. Number 5, taking control of the middle. In chess, the winning strategy is to take control of the middle of the board in order to maximize the number of possible moves and control the movement of the most pieces. As demonstrated by John D. Rockefeller's control of the refinery business in the early days of the oil trade and Microsoft's control of the operating systems in the early days of the software world, the same strategy works profitably in business. Number 6, copyrights, trademarks, and patents. The three concepts, along with others, protect the creative work produced by entrepreneurs, providing additional incentives for creativity and promoting capitalism, creative destruction model. Providing additional incentives for creativity and promoting capitalism's creative destruction model. Without these safeguards, information and creative workers are helpless in the face of free distribution of their work. Number 7, bookkeeping with 2 entries. The bookkeeping system, which was introduced in Genoa in the 14th century, is one of modern capitalism's marvels. Every entry, such as income, must also be entered into a corresponding account in the double entry system. This type of bookkeeping serves as a safeguard against potential accounting errors, allowing for accurate records and, as a result, more accurate behavior on the part of the business owner. Number 8, efficacy, marginal, diminishing, increasing. The utility of additional units of any good varies according to scale. In most practical areas of life, marginal utility allows us to understand the value of one additional unit, and that utility diminishes at some point. Additional units, on the other hand, may be subject to a critical point where the utility function jumps up or down discretely. Number 9. Bribery. Bribery is a central concept in human systems that is often overlooked in mainstream economics. Given the opportunity, it is often easier to pay a certain agent to look the other way than to follow the rules. After that, the enforcer of the rules is neutralized. Arbitrage can be seen as a solution to the principal/agent problem. Number 10. Arbitrage. If two markets sell the same good, an arbitrage exists if the goods can be bought profitably in one and sold profitably in the other. This model appears simple at first glance, but it can take many forms. The only gas station within a 50-mile radius is also an arbitrage because it can buy gasoline and sell it at a profit, temporarily, without interference. Almost all arbitrage opportunities fade away as they are discovered and exploited. Number 11. Demand and supply. The basic equation of biological and economic life is that there is a finite supply of necessary goods and that there is fierce competition for those goods. Economic entities compete for limited customer wealth and demand for their products in the same way that biological entities compete for limited usable energy. Equilibrium refers to the point where supply and demand for a given good are equal. However, in real life, equilibrium points are dynamic and changing, never static. Number 12. Scarcity. Conflict, limited resources, and competition are all described by game theory. What decisions are competitors likely to make, and which should they make given a specific situation in a limited amount of resources and time? One thing to keep in mind is that traditional game theory may portray humans as being more rational than they are. After all, game theory is just that, theory. Number 13. Mr. Market. Mr. Market was created by investor Benjamin Graham to represent the vicissitude of the financial markets in his book, The Intelligent Investor. As Graham explains, the markets are like a moody neighbor who wakes up happy sometimes and sad other times. Your job as an investor is to profit from his bad mood and sell to him when he's in a good mood. In contrast, according to the efficient market hypothesis, Mr. Market always wakes up in the middle of the night, never feeling particularly strong in either direction. Mental models from military and war. Number 1. Getting a look at the front. The habit of seeing the front before making decisions, rather than relying on advisors, maps, and reports, all of which can be faulty or biased, is one of the most valuable military tactics. The map/territory model, as well as the incentive model, demonstrate the issue of not seeing the front. Seeing the front can benefit leaders in any organization because it not only provides first-hand information, but it also tends to improve the quality of second-hand information. Number 2. Asymmetric warfare is a term used to describe a type of warfare. Due to circumstance, the asymmetry model is applied in warfare, where one side appears to play by different rules than the other. In most cases, this model is used by a low-resource insurgency. Asymmetric fighters, unable to outmuscle their opponents, resorts to other tactics, such as terrorism, to create fear that is disproportionate to their actual destructive ability. Number 3. A war on two fronts. A good example of a two-front war is World War II. Once Russia and Germany became enemies, Germany was forced to split its troops and send them to separate fronts, weakening their impact on either front. Opening a two-front war, as well as solving a two-front war or avoiding one, can be useful tactics in real life, such as an organization tamping down internal discord to focus on its competitors. Number 4. Counterinsurgency. Despite the fact that asymmetric insurgent warfare can be extremely effective, competitors have developed counterinsurgency strategies over time. General David Petraeus of the U.S. recently led the development of counterinsurgency plans that involved no additional force but significant additional gains. Tit-for-tat warfare or competition will often lead to a feedback loop that demands insurgency and counterinsurgency. Number 5, mutually assured destroyment. MAD. Surprisingly, the more powerful two opponents become, the less likely they are to destroy each other. Mutually assured destruction is used not only in warfare, such as the development of global nuclear warheads, but also in business, such as the avoidance of price wars between competitors. However, in a fat-tailed world, mutually assured destruction scenarios may simply make destruction more severe in the event of a mistake, pushing destruction on the distribution's tails. Mental models from judgment and human nature. Number 1, trust. Fundamentally, the modern world is based on the concept of trust. We trust our families, otherwise we'd have a hard time surviving, but we also trust chefs, clerks, drivers, factory workers, executives, and a variety of others. The most efficient system is the one that is based on trust. The benefits of trust are enormous. Number 2, incentives-related bias. Humans have the most varied and difficult to understand set of incentives in the animal kingdom. This leads us to distorting our thinking when it is in our best interests. A great example is a salesperson who truly believes that his product will make people's lives better. It's not just that he sells the product because it's convenient. It causes a bias in his thinking as well. Number 3, association Pavlovian. Ivan Pavlov demonstrated that animals can respond to associated objects as well as direct incentives. Remember the famous dog salivating at the ring of a bell. Humans are similar in that they can experience positive and negative emotions in response to intangible objects, with the emotions stemming from past associations rather than direct effects. Number 4, feelings of envy and jealousy. Humans have a tendency to be envious of those who have more than they do and want to get what is rightfully theirs. As soon as possible, envy is strong enough to drive otherwise irrational behavior. It's existed since the dawn of time. Any system that is unaware of its effects of envy will eventually self-destruct. Number 5, distortion by love/hate. Humans have a tendency to distort their thinking in favor of people or things that they like and against people or things that they dislike, based on past association, stereotyping, ideology, genetic influence, or direct experience. This tendency causes us to overrate what we like and underrate or broadly categorize what we dislike, often missing important nuances in the process. Number 6, denial. There's a saying, denial is not just a river in Africa. This is clearly demonstrated in situations such as war or drug abuse, where denial has powerful destructive effects but allows for behavioral inertia. Denying reality can be used as a coping mechanism, a survival strategy, or a deliberate strategy. Number 7, heuristic for availability. The availability bias, or heuristic, as Daniel Kahneman calls it, is one of modern psychology's most useful findings. We remember what is salient, important, frequent, and recent the easiest. The available heuristic is likely one of the brain's energy savings and inertial tendencies over which we have little control. It would be crippling to have a truly comprehensive memory. The anchoring and sunk cost tendencies are two sub-examples of the availability heuristic. Number 8, heuristics of representativeness. Representativeness, as defined by Kahneman, and his collaborator Tversky, encompasses three major philosophical findings. A, failure to take base rates into account, an unintentional failure to consider past outcomes when predicting current or future behavior. B, stereotyping proclivity. The proclivity to categorize and generalize rather than look for specific nuance. This like availability is a necessary trait for brain energy conservation. C. Inability to recognize false conjunctions. The Lydia test demonstrated that students chose more vividly described individuals as more likely to fit into a predefined category than individuals with broader, more inclusive, but less vivid descriptions, even when the vivid example was only a subset of a more inclusive set. In defiance of logic and probability, these scientific examples are seen as more representative of the category than those with broader but vaguer descriptions. Number 9, social validation, safety in numbers. Humans are one of many social species, which include bees, ants, and chimps, to name a few. We have a natural instinct to seek safety in numbers, and we will seek social guidance in our actions. This instinct not only fosters a sense of unity and culture that would otherwise be impossible to achieve, but it also leads us to do foolish things if the rest of our group is doing the same. Number 10, instinct for storytelling. Because of our instinct to construct and seek meaning in narrative, humans have been dubbed the storytelling animal. It's likely that we were telling stories and thinking in stories long before we learned to write or create objects. Almost every social organization, from religious institutions to corporations to nation states, is based on narrative instinct construction. Number 11, instinct of curiosity. We call other species curious, but we are the most curious of them all. An instinct that led us out of the savannah and into the classroom, where we learned a great deal about the world around us and used that knowledge to create the world in our collective minds. Curiosity leads to unusual human behavior and organizational structures, such as the scientific enterprise humans invented out of curiosity even before they were direct incentives to do so. Number 12, instinctive language. The language instinct is a term coined by psychologist Steven Pinker to describe our DNA-level desire to learn grammatical constructed language. Noam Chomsky, a linguist, was the first to popularize the idea that grammatical language is more than a simple cultural artifact. We use these instincts to create shared stories, gossip, solve problems, and fight, among other things, as we saw with the narrative instinct. Number 13, bias in the first conclusion. Charlie Munger observed that the mind works like sperm and egg. The first idea enters, and then the mind closes. This, like many other habits, is most likely an energy-saving device. Our proclivity to jump to conclusions leads us to accept many false conclusions and stop asking questions. However, this can be countered with a few simple and useful mental routines. Number 14, small samples have a propensity to overgeneralize. Humans need to generalize because we don't need to see every instance to understand the general rule, which is advantageous to us. However, when we forget about the law of large numbers and act as if it doesn't exist, we make a subset of errors. Even if we don't have a statistically sound basis for the conclusion, we have to take a small number of cases and create a general category. Number 15, tendencies of relative satisfaction/misery. Although envy is the most visible manifestation of the relative satisfaction tendency, nearly all studies of human happiness show that it is related to a person's state relative to their past or peers, rather than being absolute. These relative tendencies make us poor predictors of our own behavior and feelings, causing us great misery or happiness in a wide variety of objectively different situations. Number 16, bias of commitment and consistency. Humans have a bias towards keeping prior commitments and remaining consistent with our previous selves, as psychologists have frequently and famously demonstrated. This personality trait is essential for social cohesion. People who frequently change their minds and habits are frequently distrusted. When combined with the first conclusion bias, our Bias towards consistency can become a hobgoblin of foolish minds, as one wag put it. We end up landing on poor answers and standing pat in the face over overwhelming evidence. Number 7. Bias in hindsight. It's nearly impossible to mentally turn back the clock once we know the outcome. Our narrative instincts lead us to believe that we've always known it, whatever it is, when in reality, we're often reasoning after the fact with information we didn't have before the event. The hindsight bias explains why it's important to keep a journal of important decisions for an unaltered record, and why we should re-examine our beliefs when we convince ourselves that we knew it all along. Number 18. Fairness sensitivity. Justice is ingrained in our DNA. We are careful arbiters of what is fair, which is another example of our relative sense of well-being. Fairness violations can lead to reciprocal action or, at the very least, distrust. Fairness, on the other hand, appears to be a moving target. What is seen as fair and just in one time and place may not be in another. Number 19. Fundamental attribution error. We have a tendency to attribute other people's behavior to their innate characteristics rather than situational factors, leading us to overestimate how consistent that behavior will be in the future. Predicting behavior in such a situation does not appear to be difficult, of course. In practice, this assumption is consistently demonstrated to be wrong, and we are consequently surprised when others do not act in accordance with the innate traits that we've endowed them with. Number 20. Influence of stress. Stress triggers both mental and psychological response, amplifying the effects of other biases. As the body goes into a fight or flight response, relying solely on instinct without the emergency brake of Daniel Kahneman's System 2 type of reasoning, almost all human mental biases become worse in the face of stress. Stress leads to rash decisions, impatience, and a reversion to habit, which is why the elite soldier's motto is, in the heat of the battle, you will not rise to the level of your expectations, but fall to the level of your training. Number 21. Survivorship bias, a term referring to bias. The fact that history is famously written by the victor is a major problem with historiography, our interpretation of the past. We don't see the silent grave, as Nissim Taleb calls it, lottery ticket holders who didn't win. As a result, we tend to attribute success to the successful agent's actions rather than randomness or luck, and we frequently learn false lessons by focusing solely on the victors without considering all of the losers who acted similarly but were not fortunate enough to succeed. Number 22. Tendency to want to act. Fight/flight, intervention, demonstration of value, etc. This is what we call boredom syndrome. Most people feel compelled to act even if their actions aren't required. We also have a tendency to offer solutions even when we lack the necessary knowledge to solve the issue. Number 23. Bias in falsification and confirmation. What a man wishes he also believes. Similarly, what we believe determines what we see. This is commonly referred to as the confirmation bias. It is a deeply ingrained mental habit, both energy-conserving and comfortable, to look for confirmations of long-held wisdom rather than violations. The scientific method, on the other hand, is designed to uncover precisely the opposite, which is why it works so well when followed. It includes hypothesis generation, blind testing when necessary, and objective statistical rigor. This concludes the exhaustive list of the mental models from different disciplines. Thank you for watching this video entirely till the end. Nothing helps me out more than y'all sticking it out till the end. Please consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already done so. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like this video and share this video so that I can continue to make videos like this for you to enjoy.